Hey everybody, Riot Mort here, and it's Monday morning, which means it's time for the Monday Morning Meta Report, and this is for patch 16.6, the first week, and this was a big one, so let's see how it landed. As always, these reports are based on early experiences. Anything including this report does not mean we'll be acting on it, and data only tells us what is, meta shifts, things like that. So, here we go. All right. It's still a bit early. I mean, this was a pretty big change. The unlock changes had some pretty massive repercussions to the meta. And I think, people have really been getting their hands on it. But kind of like we see with the launch of a new set, there's still a lot of optimization going around, a lot of people figuring it out, right? Initial impressions on certain champions were that certain things were strong, but then there's been adaptations. We're seeing a big tournament play out this weekend, and we will next weekend as well. But it's still too early to like really say definitively that like the patch landed really well or not. All we can really do is early impressions. So I want to get that out of the way because, even if people are saying like it's really good right now, it may devolve. We know that. We're not silly. We don't, but where we can say it is right now, and this is as of Sunday morning, is that it's looking pretty solid. It's looking pretty solid. There's a lot of options you can play. Legendary caps certainly look to be the highest potential comps, right? If you're looking for like what board is the strongest comp out there, this is stuff like Ryze, Silas, Mel, Annie. There's some Kindred stuff that can do really well. Hilariously enough, you can see a lot of this with like Chonk's Treasure, funny enough, because Chonk's Treasure, you often reach sort of these pinnacles, and you can see that these comps really do kind of cap out the highest. That being said, based on like which prismatic or which augments you get, which encounters you get, things like that, there are 4 cost options that are still available. Bilgewater's doing really well. Yone, Warwick, Lissandra Seraphine, Demacia, Shadow Isle, stuff like that. For the first time, we're actually even seeing some 3 costs in the rotation. Reroll Ari is pretty strong. Darius is finally strong after many buffs. Noxus can be played pretty well. And there's even some 2 costs that are still doing well, Tryndamere, Ashe, and Aphelios. So overall, there are a lot of things happening. If you look at some of the like day 1 and 2 tournament results, there's just a lot of variety, and it's generally pretty healthy. That being said, it's still not perfect by any means. I don't have no disillusion that like it's, perfect. Generally because a lot of the high caps are AP based, that leads to a little bit more AP favored over AD. It would be nice if there were a few more 2 and 3 cost reroll options. Things like Teemo and Tristana are the 2 that always jump out in my mind. But even things like Echo have mostly fallen off at this point. Things like, Milio, stuff like that. And then there's still some stuff that's just a bit too narrow. It's really too hard to get into. Stuff like Aurelion Soul. T-Hex certainly dropped down. Piltover in general. So like I said, overall, though, things look pretty positive on the champs and trade side. So I don't know. I think this is really one of those things where we can say what we believe it is so far, but I would also ask like players who are playing the game or the regional players how they've enjoyed the patch. So yeah. Do want to talk about the unlock changes in general. Again, it's still early, but we took a pretty big swing here. Generally, what I'd say so far is that it's been pretty successful in allowing players to consider more options at any given point in a game, which is a good thing. It's allowing for more skill expression and the ability for players to play comps they're interested in. For example, if you really want to play Bilgewater, you were kind of forced to pray you hit a TF early. But now there's a lot more ways you can play that, or Shadow Isles, or Noxus, things like that. It's more possible to play that. And so I'll call out that things like the Graves change, Darius, Nidalee, Veigar, Yone, and Mel, I think are some of the best changes that have opened up a lot of really new options, a lot of the willingness to explore and based on your items, stuff like that. So I think those have been good. I do think some of the changes weren't bad, but also had really little impact. They didn't really do much of anything. The Shadow Isles changes, for example, other than the first one, really hasn't changed much, right? You're not really like playing Callista or Thresh outside of things yet. Skarner didn't really change a whole lot here. Aatrox, slight difference, but not really. Tom Kench really still just played in Bilgewater. Nothing really changed there. Ziggs, those are just some examples of ones that, like, again, they didn't do any harm, but they also didn't really move the needle. And then I do think there were a couple that like maybe missed the mark, and they're debatable. But I think the capstone champions here, we gave players too much access to them. It's kind of too easy to get them, and it makes them less unique. And then generally, we often say that the strength of something has to be relative to how frequently it appears. And if these things are appearing all the time, then they're probably too strong for how frequently they're appearing. And so I think in particular, Silas and Rise are just too frequent now. It's not that hard to just go to 9, and if you have a bunch of gold, find a Garen and sell it, and now you have a Silas, and even if you're playing him itemless, just the fact that he's Defender and Arcanist are two very good traits to have in your comp. But even with items, he's incredibly high capped. Rise is another one where it's like, generally you're activating this guy by accident for the most part. And I think as 7 costs in particular, we probably ended up swinging too far the other direction on these. And then the other one I think that it's debatable is Galio. Galio now, it's pretty easy to just hold a few units, unlock him, have an extra +1, get that free stun into your comp. Is that really what we wanted? So I think when I look at the changes so far, and again, it's still very early, these are the 3 that I'm like, maybe this was a mistake, maybe not. But other than that, everything seems to be generally solid. And again, I think this has been some pretty good learnings for when and if we ever decide to revisit something like this. So that's kind of my read on things. All right, time for the usuals here. Portable Forge. It dropped a bit since last week. We're generally seeing artifacts be a little less. If you can actually go look at the numbers I put in the last report, but basically it was like 4.46 versus 4.56. And now it's 4.49 versus 4.57. So it's like a tiny bit worse. But again, this could just be margin of error, things like that. I do still think there's a balance pass to do at some point of buffing up some of the less desirable artifacts. It's just really not that exciting, but it's not that far off here. And again, games aren't being warped by artifacts, which is what we promised at the start of the set. So mission accomplished. All right, overperforming artifacts. Pretty interesting shift this time. Golden Egg is still number 1 at least, so we did that. Sweet. Jarvan and Shyvana duo is back as Demacia became playable, as things like Silas are more open to it, which give it a higher cap. The Jarvan-Shyvana duo augment is back. Walk the True Path 2. I think with the more availability of Yone, we probably should have just disabled both of these. So, bit of a miss there. Component Heist, like we talked about. This one's still, I think, a very fascinating case study where without the one extra component, it was considered one of the worst augments. And then it just got one component, and now it's considered one of the best augments, which is really interesting. Just goes to show you sometimes how things can swing. Shimmer Scale Essence, definitely pretty powerful here. Rumble Hero Augment finally doing really well, even in high elo. I think the one person who got it in the tournament did really well with it. Bringer of Ruin, showing that Noxus is quite good. Spoils of War 1, Comeback Story, and 9 Lives. Now, on the bottom 90% of players, we don't really see a lot of shift here. This is actually very similar to the last week's list. It's a lot of the vertical stuff, so I'm not going to read all these out. I do want to talk about the one thing, though, is that there's generally been this sort of this narrative that like econ augments are greater than combat augments. And it's really interesting because we need to break that down more because stats-wise, this does not appear to be true. Generally looking at the stats, it's actually combat has a slight edge. But I do want to be clear that like this is one of those times where stats aren't telling the whole picture. We probably need to do a breakdown of like, well, what happens if you have 3 econ versus 2 econ versus 1 econ versus 0 econ? What does that do? Does that really have a big difference? Things like that. So pretty interesting. And that's why the combinatorics of all the different augments can be a tough thing to really break down. But overall, it's been pretty tough to really see that in the data. So kind of interesting. All right, on the underperforming side, things are looking really good here, actually. Top 1% of players, it's Ishtal Expeditionist, which we've talked about before. Pandora's Bench, which is right where it's supposed to be. Wild Growth, which probably should have been deleted 3 months ago. And then, weirdly enough, Promised Protection just happens to be underperforming this patch. I don't know what's going on there. So we'll have to look into that one. But yeah, weird to see. But that's it. Like, that's every underperforming augment. Bottom 90% of players, again, stuff that we'd expect. Ishtal Expeditionist, Win Out, Recombobulator, Pandora's Bench. I do want to call out that, World Runes is on here, but World Runes actually has an acceptable win rate, which means it's kind of doing what it's supposed to. It's a little high risk. but it has like a 14% win rate, which is what we'd expect for an augment like that in lower elo. Treasure hunt, allow a hero augment, restart mission, which again, high elo is considered a very good augment. So yeah, pretty interesting. But yeah, I think on the underperforming side, things are looking pretty solid. Now, again, I do want to call out here that this doesn't mean everything that's not listed is perfectly balanced, right? There's a big difference between a 4.2 and a 4.8. We understand that. But this has been kind of the mark that we said we would hold ourselves to and have kept you in the loop on. So, all right. And that's kind of it. That's it for the Monday morning meta report. And this will probably be the last one for a little while, at least for now. This is something I wanted to do this set to try out to help build trust and transparency. For the rest of the set, you shouldn't expect many big patches. Next up is 16.7, which is the Worlds patch, which we expect to be pretty dang small. It'll be light follow-ups from this patch, but nothing looks like way out of line anyway, so I wouldn't expect pretty crazy changes. And then 16.8 is the for fun patch, and then we're done with the set. So there's not really a lot to talk about. We've already seen that like the week 2 Monday morning meta reports don't really show us a whole lot new. They're just like, hey, it's the same. Woohoo! And this was always something I just kind of did optionally as something I wanted to try. That being said, if you guys have enjoyed this, if you found this valuable, feel free to give us feedback. But otherwise, thanks for watching these. Hopefully they've been helpful and hopefully they've accomplished what they set out to do. But yeah, so cool. All right, that is it for the Monday morning meta report. Hopefully you guys enjoy. Hopefully you're enjoying the patch. Keep giving us feedback on these unlock changes. Again, it is early. If, like I said, if a week from now or, the second week of regionals, we see it's all devolved down to only Mel or something like that, fine, we'll react accordingly. So cool. All right, that's going to do it for me. Until next time, take it easy.